I remember the first day I decided to visit my son and his wife. My heart was pounding, but not because I was nervous about meeting them. No, the nervousness came from keeping my secret hidden, a secret I had carried for years, one that would change how they saw me forever. I chose my outfit carefully, nothing extravagant, nothing flashy. Just a simple dress, soft colors, and a cardigan that made me blend into the background. I wanted them to see me as ordinary, quiet, unassuming. I wanted them to think I had nothing to offer but warmth and kindness. And that's exactly what I projected when I stepped into their home. From the moment I arrived, I watched their reactions closely. My daughter-in-law, Emily, opened the door with a bright, practiced smile. "Mom, it's so wonderful to see you," she exclaimed. But as I stepped inside, I noticed the subtle hesitation in her eyes, the slight pause before she stepped aside. My son, Michael, greeted me with a hug that was warm but careful. He had always been protective of me, but today there was a tension in his manner I couldn't quite place. The house was immaculate, filled with modern furniture, the kind of place that seemed more like a showroom than a home. I took a quiet moment to look around. Everything gleamed, but there was a sterility to it, a feeling that life existed only in carefully curated moments. My son noticed me lingering and chuckled softly. "Mom, you always notice the little things, don't you?" I smiled and nodded, keeping my voice low, my tone soft. Over the next hour, I followed Emily into the kitchen. She busied herself preparing tea, chatting about trivial things, recipes, the weather, their weekend plans. I nodded and smiled, interjecting only occasionally, always careful to keep my voice gentle. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to let her guard down. But beneath my calm exterior, I was analyzing everything. The way they interacted, the way the staff moved around, even the way the silverware reflected the light. Every detail mattered. I was hiding something, yes, but it wasn't just a secret. It was a revelation waiting to happen. I noticed Michael's eyes flicker toward me several times. He was trying to read me, to guess what I might be thinking. If only he knew that I wasn't just a simple mother-in-law coming for a polite visit. I was a woman who had built an empire quietly, who had faced challenges that would have crushed others, and who had learned to protect herself at all costs. But that knowledge was mine alone. For now, it would remain a whisper behind my gentle words. Emily led me to the living room where soft music played and sunlight spilled through sheer curtains. She offered me a seat on the couch, and I accepted, adjusting my dress to sit gracefully. I made small talk, asking about their work, their hobbies, and subtly praising the things I knew they valued. Like the new sofa or the art on the wall, I was careful to sound impressed, but not envious, admiring without seeming calculating. I could sense that Emily was relaxing, thinking I was harmless, even endearing. That was exactly what I wanted. But just beneath the surface, I was observing every word, every gesture, every smile. I was looking for cracks, moments where truth might slip through their carefully constructed facades. As the conversation continued, I noticed the subtle ways Emily tried to impress me. The way she laughed a little too loudly at my jokes, the way she mentioned achievements in passing, almost like she wanted validation. I smiled inwardly. They had no idea that I had learned to read people like books, to see the truth behind every act. The afternoon passed, and Michael suggested we take a walk in the garden. I agreed, of course. Outside, the sunlight was warm, and the garden smelled of fresh blooms. Emily chatted about her favorite flowers while I listened, nodding politely, letting her share stories. I kept my tone soft, my smile gentle, making her believe that I was just a simple mother-in-law, someone easy to please and unthreatening. But even as I walked beside them, I was calculating. I noted the layout of the garden, the security cameras, even the position of the gates. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. I had always been prepared. And while they thought they were showing me their world, I was silently mapping it, knowing that one day, everything they took for granted could shift in an instant. As we returned indoors, Emily suggested dinner. I agreed, and as we sat at the table, I watched her carefully set the plates, arrange the cutlery, and even pour the wine with a certain elegance. I complimented her subtly, letting my words convey admiration. But beneath that, I was assessing, learning, observing. Dinner was uneventful on the surface. We talked about family, childhood memories, and the occasional humorous anecdote. But each word I spoke was calculated. Each smile carefully measured. I wanted them to feel comfortable, to let their guard down, and most importantly, to underestimate me. After dinner, Emily brought out a photo album. She smiled as she opened it and began showing pictures of their travels, friends, and family gatherings. I looked at the photos carefully, smiling at each memory they shared. But behind my eyes, I was studying the relationships, the connections, and the subtle power dynamics. Who held influence? Who made decisions? Who really controlled the household? I asked gentle questions, showing interest, but always steering the conversation toward my observations. Emily, delighted that I was so interested, didn't realize that I was quietly taking mental notes, understanding the rhythm of their lives, the strengths and vulnerabilities of their household. Later, as I prepared to leave, I hugged Michael. Feeling the warmth of our bond, Emily thanked me for coming, her voice sincere, and I smiled, responding with soft words of encouragement. But as I stepped into my car, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. They had no idea that I wasn't just a gentle, quiet mother-in-law. I was someone who understood the world in a way they couldn't even begin to imagine. And the secret I carried, well, it was only just beginning to unravel. The drive home was quiet, but my mind raced. I thought about the days to come, about the careful steps I would take to reveal my hidden self, to show them that I was more than they had ever expected. I wasn't in a hurry. Patience was part of the plan, and the more they underestimated me, the more powerful my revelation would be. As night fell, I sat in my study reflecting on the day. I made notes, not of the house, the furniture, or the garden, but of the people themselves, their habits, their words, their fears, their pride. Everything mattered. And the truth I had hidden for so long was ready to make its entrance, quietly, elegantly, and with undeniable force. By the time I went to bed, I knew one thing for certain. The next meeting would be the beginning of a journey that none of them would ever forget. They thought I was simple, soft-spoken, and harmless, but they were about to discover that behind that gentle demeanor was a mind sharp as a blade and a secret powerful enough to change everything. And so, the stage was set. The act had begun and the curtain was rising. The following week, I returned to my son and daughter-in-law's home, this time carrying a small gift for Emily, a simple bouquet of fresh flowers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to maintain the image I had carefully cultivated, the soft-spoken, thoughtful mother-in-law. I wanted her to think I was harmless, kind, almost ordinary, and yet, under that exterior, I was preparing for something far more profound. As soon as I stepped inside, Emily's eyes lit up with genuine happiness. "You didn't have to bring me anything, Mom," she said, her voice warm. I smiled softly, letting my tone convey gratitude without arrogance. Michael greeted me with a hug, and I noticed the subtle way he glanced around, as if expecting something unusual. But I remained calm, measured, letting them feel the quiet presence of a woman who appeared gentle, but was quietly observing everything. We settled into the living room, and Emily began to chatter about her work and the little events of the past week. I listened attentively, nodding at the right moments, asking gentle questions that encouraged her to speak more. She laughed easily, completely unaware that I was noticing far more than she realized. The way she hesitated when talking about certain colleagues, the way she exaggerated some achievements while glossing over others. Every small detail painted a picture of the household I had yet to fully explore. After a while, I suggested we step into the garden. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow over the flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. Emily was delighted, naturally, and began talking about her gardening hobby. She moved with confidence, arranging pots and trimming leaves, clearly proud of her little domain. I watched her carefully, not out of judgment, but out of calculation. A person's habits, their pride, the way they manage their world, all of it revealed who they truly were. I commented softly on the flowers, asking about the choices she had made, subtly guiding her to reveal more about herself. Emily, eager for approval, didn't notice that I was analyzing her reactions. I wanted to know her strengths, her weaknesses, the things that made her feel secure, and the things that made her uneasy. By the time we returned indoors, I had gathered enough insights to begin formulating a plan that would test their assumptions, reveal hidden truths, and ultimately make them see me in an entirely different light. Dinner that evening was a quiet affair. Michael seemed distracted, glancing at his phone more than usual. Emily tried to engage him in conversation, but there was an underlying tension I could sense. My eyes followed every movement, every glance, and every pause in the conversation. I didn't comment. I simply let it pass, allowing them to feel that I was nothing more than an observer. After dinner, Emily suggested we watch some family videos. She placed the laptop on the coffee table and began clicking through the clips. Laughter filled the room as memories played out on the screen. I smiled along with them, my voice soft as I remarked on funny moments, but inside I was evaluating the dynamics. The way Emily interacted with Michael, the way he responded, the subtle power balance in their marriage. It was in that moment, as I watched them laugh, that I realized just how deeply I could influence them. They had underestimated me completely, and that would be their greatest mistake. I had lived through hardships, faced challenges, and developed an intuition that allowed me to read people with unnerving accuracy. What they thought was simplicity was actually strategy. What they thought was softness was actually control. The next few days were spent carefully observing from a distance. I didn't want to seem intrusive. I wanted them to feel comfortable, to let their guard down even further. I attended small gatherings, offered advice in a gentle tone, and maintained the appearance of being nothing more than a considerate mother-in-law. But every word, every gesture was calculated. I was laying the groundwork for the revelation that would come. Then came the moment I had been waiting, for Michael invited me to help with a project he had been working on, something that involved significant financial decisions. Emily seemed proud, talking about how organized he was and how impressive his plan sounded. I listened, nodding, asking quiet, thoughtful questions, and then, at just the right moment, I began to reveal a piece of information they hadn't expected. "Have you considered?" I started, my voice gentle but confident. I offered an insight based on years of experience, a perspective they hadn't thought of. Their eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and admiration. I continued, guiding them to see possibilities they had overlooked, all the while maintaining the calm demeanor they had grown accustomed to. Emily looked at me, her smile faltering slightly. "Mom, you knew about this?" she asked, a hint of wonder in her voice. I nodded, letting my soft tone convey reassurance. "Sometimes it helps to have another perspective," I said quietly. It was true, and yet it was only a fraction of what I had truly been keeping hidden. Over the next hour, the dynamic in the room shifted subtly. They were no longer just my son and daughter-in-law. They were students in a class they didn't even know they were attending. And I, the teacher, was gentle, soft-spoken, and patient, letting them discover the lessons I had prepared for them without feeling coerced. As the evening drew to a close, Emily brought out a dessert she had made herself. She offered it to me with pride, expecting praise. I complimented her softly, letting my voice convey sincerity. But inside, I was already planning the next steps, thinking ahead to how I would gradually reveal the full extent of my secret. Driving home that night, I reflected on the day the seeds had been planted, and now it was only a matter of time before they grew into something undeniable. They thought they had seen the real me, but they had only glimpsed the surface. Beneath the calm exterior was a woman who had faced more than they could imagine, a woman who had learned to protect herself and those she cared about with quiet precision. In the following days, I noticed subtle changes. Michael consulted me more frequently, asking my opinion on matters he previously handled alone. Emily's respect grew, her curiosity about my past increasing with each conversation. They were slowly realizing that I was not as simple as I appeared, and yet they still had no idea about the full truth, the part of me that would shock them, inspire them, and perhaps even frighten them when finally revealed. One evening, as we sat in the living room discussing future plans, I decided to drop a hint. "There are things I've done in my life that might surprise you," I said softly, almost as if speaking to myself. Michael's eyes widened, and Emily leaned forward, curiosity piqued. "Really?" Emily asked. I nodded, my voice calm. "Yes, and perhaps one day I'll share everything. But not yet. Patience is key." The subtle tension that entered the room was electric. They were intrigued, caught between admiration and suspicion, and that, I realized, was exactly the effect I wanted. By appearing gentle and unassuming, I had made them curious. By withholding my full story, I had created anticipation, and soon the truth would emerge in a way they could never forget. As I left their home that night, I felt a thrill of satisfaction. The dance had begun, the game was in motion, and every step I took was calculated to maximize the impact of the revelation I would deliver. They thought they knew me. They thought I was simple and soft-spoken. But what they didn't know was that I was holding a secret powerful enough to change everything they thought they understood about me, and perhaps even about themselves. And so, the quiet days continued, the subtle interactions, the gentle observations, all building toward a crescendo that would reveal my true self. They had no idea what I was hiding, but soon they would. The days following my visit were quiet, almost serene, but I could sense a subtle shift in the household. Michael and Emily were more attentive, more thoughtful, and slightly unsettled. It wasn't that they suspected anything directly, but my soft words, my gentle observations, and the hints I had dropped were creating ripples. They didn't know it yet, but their comfortable world was beginning to tilt. I returned again. This time, under the guise of a casual visit, I carried nothing, said little, and let my calm presence fill the room. Emily greeted me warmly, but there was a tension beneath her smile, a curiosity, an almost imperceptible question in her eyes. What is she hiding? We settled into the living room, the sunlight streaming through the curtains casting a warm glow over the space. I commented softly on the decor, praised the small details, and then allowed silence to linger for a few moments. In that silence, I could feel the subtle unease rising, a quiet anticipation that I had begun to orchestrate. Michael spoke first, almost hesitantly. "Mom, I've been thinking about your advice from the other day. I realized I might have been overlooking something important." His voice carried a mix of humility and curiosity. That was exactly what I had intended. By appearing gentle, soft-spoken, and wise, I had guided them to seek my perspective. Emily joined in, her tone equally soft, tinged with wonder. "Yes, Mom. You always seem to notice things we don't. How do you see it so clearly?" I smiled, my voice quiet and calm. "Experience teaches us to pay attention," I said softly. "Sometimes the smallest details reveal the biggest truths." They were both attentive, hanging on my words, unaware that these conversations were carefully designed. Every comment, every question, every pause was meant to build anticipation. They were slowly realizing that I was not just a simple mother-in-law. They were beginning to understand that I possessed insight, knowledge, and perhaps even influence beyond what they had imagined. Over the next hour, I subtly guided the conversation toward their future plans. Financial decisions, career moves, and household management. I asked gentle questions, nudging them to think more critically, to consider possibilities they hadn't yet imagined. Each response they gave revealed more about themselves, their hopes, their fears, and their priorities. At one point, Emily mentioned a challenge she had been facing at work. I listened quietly, my expression soft and empathetic, and then offered a suggestion. My words were gentle, almost casual, but they carried weight. Michael and Emily both looked at me, eyes wide, as if they were discovering a side of me they hadn't expected. You've been through things like this before, haven't you? Michael asked, a trace of awe in his voice. I nodded, letting my calm demeanor hide the depth of what I knew. Yes, life teaches us lessons, sometimes harshly, but every experience leaves insight behind. That insight, it's valuable if you know how to use it. Emily's curiosity grew. Mom, I feel like there's so much you're not telling us. Something about your past, maybe? You seem different from what we imagined. I smiled faintly, keeping my tone soft. There are stories for another time, I said. Patience reveals the most important truths when the moment is right. Their fascination was palpable. They wanted to know more, but I deliberately withheld the full story. The secret I carried was potent, something that could upend their assumptions entirely, and I wanted to time its revelation perfectly. For now, teasing them with hints, letting them sense my hidden depth, was enough to create tension and anticipation. Later that week, Michael called me unexpectedly. Mom, can you come over? I think we need your perspective on something important. His voice was urgent but controlled. I smiled to myself, knowing that the seed I had planted was growing. They were beginning to rely on me in ways they hadn't before, seeking guidance, seeking insight, seeking understanding. When I arrived, I found them in the study, papers scattered across the desk, tension in the air. Emily looked frazzled, Michael determined but uncertain. I settled quietly into the room, observing the scene before speaking. Tell me everything, I said softly, my voice calm yet commanding attention. They explained a challenge involving investments and family decisions, the kind of situation that required careful navigation and experience. I listened, nodding, asking questions here and there to gather more information. Then, at the right moment, I offered my perspective. Not advice in a forceful way, but insight. Gentle, calm, strategic insight that illuminated paths they had overlooked. The effect was immediate. Michael's posture relaxed, Emily's expression softened, and the air in the room shifted. They looked at me differently now, not just with respect, but with awe. They began to realize that the woman they thought was simple, soft-spoken, and ordinary had wisdom, knowledge, and a life experience that neither of them could fully comprehend. As the evening continued, I shared small anecdotes from my past, carefully curated, enough to hint at challenges I had faced without revealing the full magnitude. Emily listened intently, curiosity burning in her eyes. Michael asked more questions, subtly probing for details, and I gave just enough to intrigue, to spark their imagination, without giving away the full truth. Later, as I prepared to leave, Michael pulled me aside. Mom, I had no idea. You've been through so much, and yet you've always carried yourself with such grace. How do you do it? I smiled softly, my voice low. Grace comes from understanding oneself, I said, and understanding comes from experience. One day, you may see that sometimes the simplest people carry the deepest truths. Driving home that night, I felt a surge of satisfaction. My secret was beginning to ripple through their lives, subtly influencing their decisions, their perceptions, and even their confidence. They were no longer just my son and daughter-in-law. They were participants in a journey I had orchestrated, unwittingly preparing themselves for a revelation that would change everything. The following days were a careful dance. I visited occasionally, offering guidance, observing interactions, and dropping subtle hints about my past achievements and experiences. Each encounter deepened their curiosity, heightened their respect, and strengthened my influence. The more they underestimated me, the more powerful the eventual revelation would be. Then came the turning point. Michael and Emily invited me to a family gathering, an event filled with friends and colleagues. I attended as usual, dressed simply, speaking softly, blending in. But beneath that calm exterior, I was acutely aware of every detail: the interactions, the subtle hierarchies, the underlying tensions. At one moment, a business acquaintance of Michael's asked a challenging question regarding a decision he had made. Michael faltered, unsure how to respond. I spoke softly, offering insight that was accurate, strategic, and precise. The room went quiet, eyes turning to me. In that instant, Emily and Michael realized, more than ever before, that the woman they thought they knew had layers of depth, intelligence, and experience that commanded respect. The realization in their eyes was unmistakable. Curiosity, admiration, and subtle fear mingled as they began to understand that my calm, soft-spoken exterior had been a carefully maintained illusion. They were seeing hints of the truth, though not the full story, and it was enough to shift the dynamics of their world. As the evening wound down, Emily pulled me aside. Her voice was soft, almost trembling with curiosity. "Mom, I think I finally understand. You're not just gentle, are you?" I smiled faintly, my tone calm. "Not always. Sometimes it's what you don't show that carries the most weight. The truth has its own timing, and when revealed, it can change everything." And with those words, I left the gathering, knowing that the secret I had carried for years was now beginning to reveal its first ripple. The impact was subtle, but undeniable. They were beginning to see me not just as a mother-in-law, but as someone whose experiences, wisdom, and hidden truths could influence, guide, and even astonish them. Driving home, I reflected on how far the journey had come. The calm exterior, the soft voice, the gentle smiles. They were all part of a carefully constructed plan, and the secret I had been hiding, the one that had been my strength for years, was now poised to make its full entrance into their lives. Soon, I thought, they would understand. Not just pieces, not just hints, but the entire truth. And when that moment arrived, the world they thought they knew would change forever. The day had finally arrived. I had planned this visit meticulously, knowing it would be the moment to reveal the secret I had carried for so long. My calm exterior, my soft voice, and my gentle demeanor had set the stage. Everything was in place. I was ready to show them who I truly was. When I arrived, Emily greeted me with her usual warm smile, but I noticed a flicker of anticipation in her eyes. Michael stood by the door, a mix of curiosity and unease written across his face. They had sensed for weeks that there was more to me than met the eye, but neither of them had any idea just how deep my secret ran. We sat in the living room as I began to speak. I didn't rush. My voice was soft, measured, almost casual. "There's something I've been keeping from you," I said. Emily leaned forward instinctively, her eyes wide. Michael's hands tightened slightly on his knees. "It's not something I've hidden out of mistrust or fear," I continued. "It's because the timing had to be right, and that time is now." I watched them carefully, gauging their reactions. Emily's brow furrowed slightly, curiosity and concern warring for dominance. Michael's eyes darted between me and the furniture, as if trying to predict what would come next. I let the silence stretch for a moment, allowing tension to build, and then, slowly, I began to reveal the first layer of my truth. "You think you know me as simple, soft-spoken, gentle, and in many ways that is true," I said, my voice calm, "but those qualities, They are only a part of who I am. I have faced challenges, decisions, and experiences that you cannot imagine. I have built a life, made choices, and carried responsibilities that required more strength than most people will ever need. Emily gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. Michael leaned forward, eyes wide, and for the first time I saw a flicker of awe. I had prepared for this moment for years, but seeing their genuine reaction was a thrill unlike any other. They were finally beginning to understand that the woman they thought they knew was only the surface. I took a slow breath and continued. I have faced situations that tested every part of me, my patience, my courage, my resilience, and I have survived, not just to endure, but to protect those I love. You, your father, even you, Emily, my experiences have shaped me to safeguard what matters most. Emily's voice trembled. Mom, I had no idea. I always thought you were just quiet, sweet, and ordinary. Michael's expression mirrored hers, shock and admiration blending into a profound respect. But there is more, I said softly. Much more. What you see now is only the beginning of the story. There are resources, strategies, and knowledge I've accumulated that can guide, protect, and empower this family. Everything I've done, everything I've learned. It was to prepare for moments like this, to help those I care about navigate life with wisdom and foresight. I watched as comprehension dawned in their eyes. The awe, the disbelief, the admiration, they were all there. And as I spoke, I felt a sense of triumph, not from ego, but from knowing that my secret, carefully guarded for so long, was finally unfolding. I leaned forward slightly, my voice still gentle but now carrying the weight of authority. You have underestimated me, and that is natural. People often underestimate those who appear soft, quiet, or unassuming. But strength is not always loud. Wisdom does not always demand attention. And influence, sometimes it is hidden, quiet, and strategic. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, all this time, you've been preparing us? Emily's eyes glistened with tears. Yes, I said softly. I have been preparing you, guiding you, watching over you without you realizing it. Every suggestion, every conversation, every moment I spent quietly observing, it was all part of ensuring you are strong, capable, and ready for life's challenges. The weight of my words settled over them. They were stunned, moved, and deeply affected. I continued, gently revealing more details of my life, trials I had faced, obstacles I had overcome, and lessons I had learned. I shared stories of resilience, courage, and strategic thinking. I explained how these experiences shaped me and how they could benefit from my insights, guidance, and protective measures. Emily reached out, holding my hands. Mom, I don't even know what to say. You've been through so much, and yet you've carried yourself with such grace. Michael nodded, his voice choked with emotion. I can't believe I never realized how much you've done for all of us. I smiled softly, my heart full. You don't need to say anything, I said. Understanding and respect are enough. And now, when the time comes, you will see that everything I have done, everything I have withheld, was not to deceive, but to prepare, to protect, and to empower you. For the next hour, I guided them through practical applications of my experience, financial strategies, career advice, and even lessons in managing relationships and navigating challenges. Each piece of guidance was carefully calibrated, blending wisdom with empathy, insight with practicality. They listened intently, taking in every word, every suggestion, every revelation. By the time the evening ended, the transformation was undeniable. They no longer saw me as the quiet, gentle mother-in-law they had assumed I was. They saw me for who I truly was, a woman of strength, wisdom, and depth, whose hidden life had prepared me to guide, protect, and empower those I loved. As I prepared to leave, Emily embraced me tightly, tears in her eyes. "Mom, thank you. I don't even have words. You've changed everything for us." Michael joined, placing his hand on my shoulder. We underestimated you, Mom. But now, I see. I truly see." I smiled softly, letting my calm exterior remain intact even as my heart swelled with quiet triumph. "Remember, patience and observation are powerful," I said softly. "Strength is not always visible, and wisdom is often hidden. But when revealed, it has the power to transform everything." Driving home that night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My secret, long hidden, had finally emerged. The awe, respect, and understanding in their eyes were proof that the journey had been worth it. They had learned a profound lesson, not just about me, but about the power of quiet strength, strategic thinking, and patience. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle but profound changes. Michael approached challenges with newfound perspective. Emily made decisions with confidence, and the household itself seemed more harmonious. They were no longer operating under assumptions. They were empowered by the truth, guided by the wisdom I had carefully nurtured. And yet, even as the secret was revealed, the bond between us deepened. What had begun as simple visits, polite conversations, and soft-spoken interactions had transformed into mutual respect, admiration, and love. They saw me for who I truly was, and I saw in them a readiness, a maturity, and a capacity for growth that made the revelation even more meaningful. I realized that the true power of my secret was not in the shock it created, but in the way it empowered them. They had underestimated me, yes, but that underestimation was necessary. It allowed the revelation to have maximum impact, to inspire trust, respect, and a deeper connection. As I reflected on the journey, I knew one thing with certainty: appearances can be deceiving. Soft-spoken voices can conceal extraordinary strength. Simple actions can mask profound wisdom, and patience, observation, and timing can transform lives in ways that bold declarations never could. By the end of that week, the household had shifted subtly but irrevocably. They carried the lessons, the revelations, and the empowerment I had shared with them into their daily lives. And while the secret was now known, the respect, admiration, and quiet awe it inspired would remain, quietly shaping their choices, decisions, and relationships for years to come. I smiled, knowing that the mission had been accomplished. The secret had been revealed, the impact was profound, and the bond between us had grown stronger than ever. They had no idea, for years, how deeply I had prepared, how carefully I had observed, and how patiently I had waited. And now, they finally understood.